Delay number some. Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Tibetan.
Ningat song going to Jakai, Katsan, Kinikan, the Dragon Trotany Matazo, Dinima, a short on the need Genesis Media good coaching race, like to inject my one, which you let in the research on the
Yeah, okay, so we'll start from where we stopped last class. So now we are reading from the text Science and the Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classics, and we are on page 375.
Last Katazo, some logo now pencil, Chickla no patchini, some look the Kyatama, Yonita, some Yashot Yadita, the Tablamon, which is shaving on it, until Tablam chick the carrizina, but the children from the Sachome and the Tepop and the Nimayans in Itima Shavia. Tati candidate Chila, what is it? Then Namazo, Tonda Kashi Chita, non sure at the Hak was on Hamakwana, who mepazo the Tapshi or Maris, Peter Tinijando, Pena, Mazo Pombo, Tapari Samni Dedena. Tinamiano to say to Maris, T. Pombo Taparis and Biblioteca, Mepa Pombo Matop at the top Palatini, Pombo Towns and the Mepachando race. What is on that Tenjiguni, Tenanjan, down Mepa con Biblioteca, Dansalano Piconi, down the Mepazoni, Yomamba Mepazo, Itani, Opinoni, Tablatin, what is an easy Yomart and the Shirablatin, Tabshin, Shirablatin, Cotandre.
So now we are discussing about how mental factors are mutually incompatible and counteracting each other. So we talked about it in the context of how by applying different methods in order to give rise for positive mental factors and states of mind, the negative states of mind are being reduced and removed from our mental state. And we talked about this kind of different methods. So regarding one of these methods, there is a quote of Master Dharmakirti, the Indian Buddhist master, who says, if its object is not refuted, then the mental state cannot be abandoned. So this is indicating one of the it indicates one of the methods of how to counteracting negative mental states. So this kind of method is by realizing that the referent object or that the object that the mistaken minds hold is actually non-existent and is actually a mistaken way of grasping at the object. By understanding this, so we actually refute the object and then we replace it with an understanding of how, with a correct understanding of the object. So if we give an example of a mind that, let's say, grasp at the aggregates, which means like the physical aggregate or the mental aggregate, to be permanent. So in order to refute, in order to counteract this kind of mistaken grasping at the object, what we should do is that we should refute the existence of the referent object of this mistaken mind, which is in this case a permanent aggregate. So by refuting their existence, so then we can counteract it with the correct understanding that the mind, that the aggregates are impermanent. So this is one method in order to counteract this kind of negative mental states. And this kind of method we can also apply to wisdom realizing emptiness, counteracting the ignorance grasping at the self. So this kind of mental states that counteract each other. So this is talking from the perspective of the method of wisdom. Yeah, how like the counteractor is counteracting the counteractor by means of wisdom.
That's what I mean. Takoso Saulo Machik Pani, younger Tata Redeni, which chick the Saulo the Tande, Saulo Chicken Golajana, chick the Logore, and you parts of Nopa, Liberty Younger Reves, and a ten we patch them and do pen and Docha the controls the day, younger Tata Redeores. You know, Docha she cheered in Joti, control on Android, and you gave Markup the control that Leo Marita, cut the control of Chicano Mars, the Coropashal. All I know is that Tata de control Yanjo Shichim, the control Lena, Dochala Paya, Chicano Maris, the Konica, younger Tata Samlochi Devita Sonza, and so Nomo Balcate still no Pisamlochi, Comshi Timbalatini, Pasholan, Catecha Goremato, younger Yimbats and Maris, and if you water Terindo. Chata Controni, younger Tatar Chate or the Chiquichino Maris. On top in a Dochala no pallet and Dopa Chonritano, Jedano no pallet, Zobagoma, and you cut Cortamna Tingorema, younger Imbats and no patching room come lose.
And then another thing that we need to understand is that there is no necessity that if the different kind of mental states or mental factor are directly contradicting each other, they are necessarily, what we call antidote to each other. And what is the reason? So if you're talking, for example, about attachment and anger, so they are directly contradicting each other. And there is there are directly contradictions of each other. They are mutually incompatible. But it is not like that they are an antidote for each other. And the reason is that even though when we have attachment, the anger doesn't arise in our mind, it is still like the attachment doesn't harm or doesn't counteract the anger. It is just that the anger is, for the time being, is latent by means of its potential, but it is not like that the attachment is serving as an antidote to that anger. And the same thing for the anger. When we have anger in our mind, this is not the attachment doesn't arise, but it is not like the anger is an antidote for the attachment. So actually, in order to be an antidote, we need to, in order to develop an antidote for a certain kind of destructive emotion, we should actually rely on a certain method. For example, if we have anger in our mind, so we need to rely on patience, and we can also apply it for the other kind of negative mental factors. But just by means of being different by how the mental states engage with the object, there is no necessary. It is not necessary that they are also being antidote towards each other.
So, telling up Yamato, Laftanch, you are not so draw me at Ran Sim you want the Sim Yomu want the Canini, Canil, Norris, initiate your Matso, and draw me in a Simchan Kangana. Do the one jet getting at Samlo the Chade or Samlo the one jet, not so Samlo one jet, Samlo de Yomungo Choco one jet, or Mangaso Samlo Telesamlo Yapota, the Jani of Pinoni Katina. The capsule one just change over and also take the controls in there and the child and Chatos and Nigers. This will calendar Chikan Yamagoni, Ranjim Shahli, actually. That chance it and Ninjeta and Jampan of Zopa Comia. Not so now give lawyer poaching in Bahata Kodia Gori that so, but such imagine arranging the Yomato at the end Sontanatu. I'm judging the channel, same Yomo one, so Yomo one, so on Latin in Kangam, which she did.
And another thing that we are saying, for us people, we are our mind is being under the power of mental affliction, of different kind of mental negative states, and by being under this kind of influence, we are getting ourselves into different kind of troubles and difficulties. So therefore, since we are under the influence and the impact of anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, and so forth, so we get into a lot of troubles, and these kind of mental afflictions arise in our mind like very, very naturally. We don't have like to make a lot of efforts. Just like by very, very small conditions, they just arise like very intensively. But as for the positive mental states, such as love, compassion, patience, the mind that wishes to benefit others, and so forth, all these kind of positive mental states, we actually need to make a lot of efforts in order to give rise to them in our mind. So this is a kind of explanation of how, by being under the influence of the in mental afflictions, we get into a lot of difficulties and problems.
Last honey, then the che only, also Navja Genta Yamling Tanishina, Chamba Gongoata, Seva Gongoata, Zopa Gongoa, Jimba Tangua, Lasso, but that's what the tongue Zamuling, which you Karinyamli Chinkachina, purchase you Panda, what you say, you know that. Chulkanoni de Labjatic of the Oretanato, Laling the Town, now Geshe Rangrig Dorjee Mari, Katina control for Leon, the control for a launch you, Docha Len and Docha Lechu, Chato Chen and Chato Lechini, Kotolo Moncha Yatambachini, so Jamba Chocolab Chatalchuni, Machini, say Ricky de Ores, on that's all Navja Gindal theaters of the Chip Wacheta, Mandravan Road, Chancho Kasim, Zetia, the Pachinambi Kachiri Mato, the Chilijam Marisam.
So in general, we can say that we have all the time teachings about different practices that we should engage with, such as the practice of love, compassion, patience, and the mind that wish to benefit others, all these kind of things. So we hear the teachings about how we should apply this kind of mental states again and again, right? But actually, even though these kind of advices are being said in the context of all the different religious traditions, still, when we try to practice things, so we don't really get to practice them properly, right? Because what we usually do is that with regard to the different kind of negative emotions, such as jealousy, attachment, anger, and so forth, so we just let them like very, very easily to arise in our mind. And otherwise, we are not really paying the proper attention to the advice that is being given to us from this spiritual tradition of what we should actually practice and what we should actually adopt. And therefore, yeah, we should be a bit careful about how, what kind of mental states we let our mind to develop. And though like all these kind of different positive mental states, such as love, compassion, and passions are in common with all the different kind of spiritual traditions, I think that the mind aspiring for enlightenment, this is something which is uncommon with Buddhism.
Certainly, Chanchuk Sim Zidiat Mandrava Kaniji, Chanchuk Sim Ziatita, Nambi Shetan Juri, Ketan as a Chulitala, Arab Shawniz Gonata, Tinitar Yote, Israel Kanda Jew Chulizia, Anthony, Ishichulu Kachulu, Sony Mataron, Chichimbo Sondo, Yakarnitarion, Indi Chulita, Nambi Chulita, Tanda, Punjab Chulizia, and Rota, Chulutan Chulu Mambo Chitandota. Pukishoni Maju, Chulini Magi on the Kosoration, the numbers they are the Hindi that so the Mandrapunda watching Yakalima carrying on duration. You know, the Chulit Soma Manchester, Conchonji, the Copa, Conchon the killing the worry, Sonta, Conchoninaya, Nation Kamaki and Rota, and Jewish Sonta, Conchoni Pichetos of Pagoma, Lasso, Pisano, Yapo, in the Lapchatu, the Tere, Laundutangi, Tatachi, the Hako Metaya, and their ring given them. The number Tisha China Temari, Tangazo Concho to Sanjay Zia, the Concho the killing body, the Concho to Jitipuba in Zemari, Concho Ziati, Michika Suso, Yamli Yapocheva, Latin, Sanjay, Pomoto, Sanjo, Tinichi, Sonta, Conjitipuba for Zemari, Sontangatsu draw Mrs. Sundichina, Narsuyamli Yapochina, Sanjay, Tanga Sanjay Shaja, but the chicken rea, your is a Sontangatsu, Simchen La Pento, which Sanji controlling and Sanji Chili, and be some literally chance of the same killing you. Sonta Tanji Copaco killing cave regular channel chance of the same the Pachicum, Tomani and the Wachilation. Montana getting on it on the
And what is the reason that we say that the mind of enlightenment, which sometimes is being translated as directly from the Sanskrit word bodhicitta, is uncommon with Buddhism? So if you are talking about different religious traditions that are spread around the world, such as the religious traditions of the Arab people, like the Islam, or the of or those of the Israelis, such as the Judaism, or those religious traditions that spread from India, such as the Hinduism or the Buddhism, and also the religion that is being practiced in the Punjab. So we have different kind of religious traditions, right? And we can say, for example, that those that there are a lot of among these traditions, a lot of religious traditions accept what we call like the God creator, and the creator of the world, and the God. And the way of practice, though I'm not sure that this is accurate, what I'm going to say, it is more in the direction of practicing patience and so forth, or this kind of positive mental states in order to please God so we can take rebirth in a pure land. And therefore, this is like the modern motivation of practice. And though in Buddhism, we also accept that there is, and actually this is a note of the translator, it's a bit difficult for to translate. In Tibetan, it means like konchok, but though like in Buddhism, we also accept like the idea of what we call, can maybe call like an object of refuge. Still, like the object of refuge it is not considered to be God or creator in the sense of some kind of an entity that created the world and so forth. But this is actually a normal person just like us that by making a lot of efforts and practicing eventually reach the ultimate uh, kind of achievement and achieve the state of the Buddha. And this kind of state of the Buddha, this is something that it doesn't matter who we are, we can actually achieve. If we will practice well, we can actually achieve the state of Buddha and become enlightened. And by aspiring to reach, by having like the wish to benefit all sentient beings, one is making a lot of efforts and practicing and eventually reach this kind of state. So therefore, I think that if we are talking about religions that accept a God creator as the object of refuge, I think that this is the reason why it would be a bit difficult to posit the presentation of the mind of enlightenment.
Also, then the issue there to get the Jachon over in the Gap Canal that Chimundo. Then sometimes so Chaloko Panjo Jatandra, that then you got Chalocum. Of Panjavan on to certain Nalico, ya, you're in H. Mari. And now Savlo when is also the same company was you showing it, not you council that it did you or something. Then after Jindal and so you get you Johnny Papa, Johnny Drogo, Amato, Yamachi Tani, and Shajana, Chikanshimondo, did an option, but so same Sabian Makipando, but Dochagani, Bolando, Bachoni Town, Dochonshi Chenita, and you could raise some Samlo, the Katina, Yato, Tani, Tinon, Chapo Machine, Jamba, Yapochona, Yaporia, Samba Tomato. I jump by a coach on this also my kidnapping. Jangi on the social Rajini Pen of Marite, not Asia. Nimatapa, Kali, Jangasem Conjitena, and same kind of pen on the Pachi Gacha Garisha, the Tilpa, killing the social Razo, Yamatina, Yapondus Giresha. Chuli Karina, take up your Marita.
So what I just explained now, this is something, this is just kind of my additional explanation. This is not something that is actually appearing in the book. And regarding the way to accomplish a lot of kind of external goals, we can say, like, for example, earning money and taking care of one's financial situation and so forth. So you have much more idea than me how to do these kind of things. But since I studied Buddhism for a lot of time, so I can say that regarding the way of taking care of our own mental states and our own minds, so I have like some kind of familiarity with these ideas. So therefore, we can say that just like if you want to develop a habit of writing some language or studying some script and so forth, we need to practice every day. You can say it in the same manner about the mental states that we have. So, for example, if you want to have less desire, if you want to decrease our attachment, we need to practice day by day this kind of mental state. It says, okay, I'm going to decrease a bit my desires. I'm going to be contented and satisfied with what I have now, and to try to actually keep this mind uh, for a long duration. And this is the same with if we want to decrease, let's say, like this kind of frustration when we see the other person having qualities that we don't have. So instead of turning the other person to a cause for us to be sad, so we try to actually uh, be happy and understand that this is his qualities, and we should uh, actually, there is no reason for us to feel frustrated from it or something like this. And actually, this kind of way of practicing the positive mental state instead of the negative mental state, this is something which will bring a lot of benefits for us. And this is something which is not asserted only by Buddhists and religious practitioners, but also by scientists. They also assert that such practice is bringing a lot of benefit to our life. And this kind of explanation, this is something which is in common with all the different spiritual religious traditions.
Lazo tinitan dinima kapkichani chena jedanga nyembozo patento yeshendo achetan zo jedanga nyembozo pakomze achansa wachimbo cheriore atin jedanga ngato kangi chama to pento che yungu yomari nasonta tinamcha gendala zopa komyatri zopa komzeata enamichi ke sosomaki paspondi kage chimala don namger matimba tetsamari sem corona ni lolo chetwat kechimburi sem gana no ta kontrozana marom maki pamu tentsamaris tishola ngal tetnyamyo no manda ochi nangaro te lontapo michi kichi lawon di tele lenchi majamna ta kyoni tema tani tanji parshi soso ta chomanda sani kali komji te ngaron chino pendo chembo chante saina ya ta chinro re samsam control on di some control on the Kati or Tayang Naro non Rishongo as an Lansa may go Chegana control the jam room. So the non Rishol theatre, Tidicali, Loni Lolo Conchitina, Sim Lolo Chango, Sim Lolo Chana, Kepsan Chile, as a Polion, Detan Leongora, or the Nichiresha.
So we explained the first method, and now we're moving for the second. So we explained like the first mode of the how mental factors and mental states are being counteracted and counteracting, and now we are moving forward to the next kind of type of how by mental how mental states by being mutually incompatible, they are serving they are being counteracted and counteracted. So now the next kind of explanation is from the perspective of the method. And we can give an example of how, in order to counteract anger or hatred, we should rely on patience. So we can say about anger or hatred that this is something that only brings us harm, and otherwise this is something that doesn't have any benefit for any of us. And actually, when we are saying patience, this is not, it doesn't mean just to have like, just not showing in outer expression that we are angry or something like this, but it also means that from our inner mind, we are also able to keep on a calm and relaxed mind at that time and not getting angry from the inside. And actually, I have a kind of experience with it. I can say that before I was quite an angry person. I used to get angry quite frequently, and I couldn't stop myself from answering or like saying back when I felt that something is being wrong like towards me or something like this. But after a while, I started to think about it, and after thinking about it more and more, I thought that actually it doesn't make any sense to behave like this. And slowly, I habituated my mind with this kind of positive patterns of thinking, and slowly, I could actually kind of habituate my mind to think that when the anger arrives, actually it will be a big mistake. Actually, it's just a very big mistake or a fault, and this is not something that I will let my mind to engage with. And it was just like a fire that when it got burned, so I could actually kind of pour water in order to extinguish it. So by understanding that it is fault, I slowly habituated my mind. It's kind of positive and mental way of thinking, and then slowly my mind became much more relaxed, and it also was very beneficial for my body. So what I just said, this is something that can be applied for all of you.
Last one, Tantal, Tapshi Nigan, the Tap Goni, Nimbote on Rezat, Carvezeti, control to the Savlot on the carriers and the Tele, the Toyer Tapachi Omar. Control the non race and Tombo Nitachin, similar to Chepos and the Sambateri. Tanda Tanzang Matatopi, Matapatopishira, Combo Tanzan, Combo Tanzan, the town the North Mundus and the Sauna Tournament. How at the Terry, each and Tapashira, they were. Control teams and town Normando should have our control on the journeys and Tombo Pakati.
So among the two types of relying on an antidote in order to counteract the negative mental state that should be counteracted. So now when we are talking about it from the perspective of the method, if we take the anger as an example, we are not investigating so much further the mode of grasping of the object of the anger, whether like the anger, the mode of how the anger is grasping at the object or how it perceives its object is a correct one or incorrect one. But we just think that actually being angry, this is something which is a mistake, and this is a fault of our mind, and therefore, since we should not have this, so we apply the antidote to it. But this is different from the first type of relying on an antidote that we just explained. And in this kind of, in the first way, as we explained, so if we take grasping at the aggregate to be permanent as an example, we take, for example, this kind of mind. So we should actually counteract this kind of a mind and grasping by means of actually exploring and investigating the mode of the grasping of this mind. So if we say that, for example, we have this mind that grasps the aggregates to be permanent, so we should actually see that the mode of the grasping of this mind, this is something which is incorrect, like this is an incorrect mode of grasping. And by understanding that the mode of grasping is incorrect, then we replace it with the antidote of it, and then this is the mode of counteracting. So this is the difference between the first type of counteracting and counteracted and the second type of counteracting and counteracted.
Also, then Yonji Karonji Tony, Mundo Chitondo, by Geshe Pali Chonja, by Yamati is in Najida Titanjo, Theatre, Taki Jau is in a number Jombar Chaz in Azopa, Control Makiwa, the Tablam, Yonji Kanon, the Condition Songun, Nadia, Karazinazo, Control the Kati Kiva Resita, Mundo Chitondo, by Geshe Pali Chonja, Pazit, Nazo, Mundo Pachi, Nijamba Cheondi, Azo, Sim Makipachi Yungares. So when Doya Chiche with the Chemachini Tel Parchechena, young Semba Maki Pachi Yungures, Semba Maki Pate, control Kalanaja, control Kalanaja Cheni, Semba Maki Patela, Teni control the Yungures and Chishendwa. Yes,
and now we have a quote from the text engaging in the Bodhisattva's way, engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds. And it says that when the undesired happens and the desired is obstructed, anger gets its fuel. Discontent and thereby inflamed, it destroys me. Seeing this, I will eradicate the fuel for this enemy of mine. So what we can see in this kind of quote is that it indicates how by practicing patience, we are actually practicing a method for the anger not to arise. So we can see that at the first two lines of this quote, it is writing when the undesired happens and the desired is obstructed, right? So it kind of indicates, it explains two modes of how our mind is getting frustrated or unhappy. One is by when things are not happening as we desire, things are not happening according to our wish. And the second one is when what we actually want is being obstructed. So these kind of two situations, they create our mind to be unhappy or frustrated. And we can say that this kind of frustration and the unhappy mind, it is like the food of the anger. And based on the food of the anger arises.
So, Jenny, did Savla Tantan the Terindo, that was Shokungal Mundo Bachi because so much of matches. Ani so do Pitonji to what Telepache Dina Simba Makipa matches. Simba Makipa chase on a control on control sonsa, control on a tini, so Makipa Jamakipa Sama Landro sonsa. Simba Makipa the control is Kalata, which is on the Katina. Control the Kalapazo, my own Simba Makipa matches in the Tablan Terisha. It's a couple of things that some of my Pache matches in. Control Simba Makipa, the control calendar, which is that the Pash of what came and share only later. You were I think what is the chase all I was.
So what is actually the way of thinking that is being explained in this kind of quote? It is that actually there are two kind of ways in which our mind is getting unhappy or frustrated. One is that when things that we are not desire for are happening. The second one is that when we are desire for something, so our desire is being kind of obstructed. Like we have some kind of an obstacle for the desire to be fulfilled. So because of these two different situations, we become frustrated or we have an unhappy mind. And this unhappy mind, this is what gives rise to the anger. And we can say that this is just like a food for the anger. And what it says in this kind of quote that we should not give the anger its food, so it won't arise. But actually to say for us like to hear that we should not be unhappy, so this is something which is quite difficult to practice and to actually implement, right? But we just need to do to the best of our ability to be a bit careful and to the best of our ability to keep our mind not frustrated and not in an unhappy state of mind.
Also, that in the Chirishatin, a non gender, Senaganimbo Jimba Tangoris, Senaganimbo Jimba Tangoris only. Also, Jimba Jimbazia, Samro, Boni, Tangi, Panjo, Sojana Roja, which is Tangi and Sambi Sembana Ochila Japando, that's a Tunganimbo Sanchel, Sanchakanyimbo Satum Zegando, Sanchalzina Hakorata, Sochi Palace of Akamachi Palace of Sanchala Wari. Opinion etc. So much about the committee about the thousand about the CGO, the opinion book controlling goes up and the shares are Lelo Zetting also, Lekakari in the Gilichi, Lopper, the Chucha, the Gilichi, the Athletil, and Batsuchi, Prisonji Latin worry. So, sound of this one of painting that Chapa or repent on crazy worry.
So now if we continue to talk about the different kind of mental states and what the antidotes are. So with regards to the antidote of miserliness or stinginess, the antidote is the practice of generosity and giving. And the practice of generosity is actually having this kind of mental state or this kind of motivation of giving the other. It can be whatever, like we want to give, like whether it's money or kind of financial possession and so forth. So this is the this is what counteracts the stinginess. And regarding incorrect, or let's search for the actual translation. And regarding yeah, I don't find the exact translation, but actually, like, sorry, and not ethical discipline, not ethical behavior, the the antidote for it would be an ethical behavior. So what we mean by saying an unethical behavior, it means to engage in actions such as killing, stealing, lying, and so forth. So the antidote for it would be to engage in an ethical behavior, such as not killing, not stealing, not lying, and this is its antidote. And the next one, which is discussed, is laziness. And laziness, it refers to having this kind of not having like this kind of desire, or like not having a desire of engaging in this kind of positive actions or in a practicing Dharma, and having like this kind of laziness about it. So the antidote for it would be joyous effort that wishes to engage by and making effort in order to accomplish like this different kind of
That's the thing. You want in my pain or Janda, so control nimbo zopa gamba jala no sem nimbo niji kom patri gomna no sem me pata control me pacha res pena tramo yondi tel sapozo na tramo me acha kandwa ani measure pena nimashare ondi chamna me pacha ndo te nam je ko ant tata no delio sonta chochik tel sablo tan chochik ranging the shendro res jan do cha control ni chochik yo na chochik tel chamno ma te kar pasol de or paronji tinji mare tanda samlo to charakta charakta no ma tam batavrela.
So all this this different kind of we can say this different kind of mental states that we presented, such when the one is to be counteracted and the other one is the antidote for it, or the what is counteracting. So we gave a different example of, for example, compassion, and how when we have compassion in our mind, so anger and an evil will, or the ill to harm. So we have the intention to harm someone else. So they are not arise when we have compassion in our mind. So this is just like when there is heat, so there is no cold at the same time or the same place. And when there is sun, and the sun is rising, so there is no shadow. So these kind of different mental states are incompatible, just like according to these kind of examples that I just said. And with regards to attachment and anger, they are not behaving in the same way. So, for example, when we have attachment in our mind, so the anger just for the time being is kind of a bit going away, but this is not like that they are counteracting each other and being an antidote for each other.
Also, the name of your local name, you can get your movie, the same John and Tactina, Chanchelo, the Muki Townsend, and Irons and Winch, Tajik, Palestinians, in the Pongo St. John could descend them on the also stabbing your mom by Chitani, your mom by Nishan and Shetari. What stabbing your mom by Chitani, your mom by Nishat Mas, so the Chachin is out on the Tina to send my Kipizo is some Shatan Rawachit, Lochtan Raw, so in also Metamaga, Loctag Simba Makipazo, Rizzo, Mares and Kashi, killing Yamaro, just some Mombo chicken docha control Merchant Choto, or no Sims and Rawat of Yotan Jetmato, Tomata, Simba Makipazo, some Shatare, so that the docha Pasavlo get them the combatinita to me Pachi for they are chichi, and what that it is. You know, Tati Doshakun Mango Mongo Chichera, the Katikati sounds. It's so. And the Kajikaji and the Shera.
Okay, this said, the early Buddhist masters on the whole maintain that since all the mental factors explained within the category of mental afflictions are ultimately rooted in the delusion of self-grasping that distortedly apprehends reality, or the view of the peripheral collection that grasps at eye and mind, cultivating specific antidotes such as loving kindness against hatred and rejoicing others' happiness against jealousy, will not be able to eliminate these afflictions permanently. So we talked in the previous classes about the different classifications of the mental afflictions. So we have 6 root afflictions and the 20 secondary afflictions. And when we think about them quite closely and quite carefully, we can see how they create unhappiness and frustration in our mind. But if we try to go through each one of these mental afflictions, there will be some people that will assert that, for example, an incorrect view. This is not something which makes our mind unhappy. There will be like different opinions, maybe about these specific mental afflictions. But if we're talking in general about these different types of mental afflictions, such as attachment, anger, pride, ignorance, um, and evil intention, and so forth, it is said that for all of these kind of different mental afflictions, we should develop its kind of opposite mental state, or in other name, their antidote, in order to counteract them.
Also, that any concept of so an angere, Yakar Kanambi Lokon Sama, the Yomo Tama, Danzali Chungari, Danza, the Locholo Colori, the Shola Dame Pitombani Congores, any, then the Sheorikati, Kachata, Danza Gatawachin, Yomo Kesatanato, Mombo Shere, Tanato, number mind issue that Ajamban Chulukarina. So the China on Dame Pazia, the Chil and Sambochi or Maris, and Lima Consumption of Tenji Sons of issue with Chutoji, Amakera Chambochios. It used to children on Tombany is in Mombochi and the Tekon Geshe Japshos on this. Ye consumption of Teta Kuraja, Geshe Kurjabo, Maricurati, Show the Salatam of prayers. Conrizena, Chulu down Jiko Popo killing it, so non the Tazia Tachani, Savachimbo, and Jacques, and number down maybe. Chonishe on the Tini Rancho Mesonta, Josh Ossi. The song is it. Sonta can to Mombo Chinicitari, beyond your dame because Chishamaguachiro.
So, just as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said in this textbook, all the Buddhist masters assert that actually we have like all these different kind of mental afflictions, and they are rooted in what we call the self-grasping ignorance, which is an incorrect mode of apprehending of the reality. And the way to counteract this self-grasping ignorance is by meditating on or cultivating the understanding of selflessness. So the way in which all the different kind of mental afflictions are arising from the self-grasping ignorance, we already discussed about it quite extensively in the previous classes. And with regards to the wisdom which realizing selflessness, this is something that in religions such as Christianity and so forth, this kind of presentation won't be accepted so much. So there is also one kind of story of His Holiness the Dalai Lama when he went to teach in one of the big kind of religious center of the Christian tradition, the Christianity. So he met with a lot of Christian practitioners, and then the head of this group, he asked His Holiness to talk about emptiness, which is kind of a term or an idea that he heard that is being used a lot in the Buddhist context. So he wanted to know about it. And then His Holiness replied that since this is something that they won't accept, or that don't really accept this kind of presentation of selflessness, since in the religion they have a lot of explanation about the self and how the self is so precious and so forth. So therefore there is no kind of, it won't be beneficial, or there won't be any point like to share this kind of teaching. So we can say that in general in the religious traditions that they accept Creator God, so they have also the presentation of the self, which is also considered to be very precious and so forth.
So Chulkari in a Cabario Maring, so Sablo Ningo Nichi Sablo Dana, Penangazo, Matsama, Messichi Kalijan, Lekanda Chichil Deviore, Katina and Dopama Kawach. So Dopat Mandravach is a worry. Three Kalija Sani Kalijana, Tandachiman, Tandachimandinia, Kalijani Messichi Jam, Tamatel and Dopanchimakani, that Trondra and the young. Then Nenga Kawatiri, Kalikasijan and Dopa Mandravata Kawatiris, and also Dopa Zeta, not so Leka and Dopa, which in your way. Sonta, the Catherine Dopa Jiminios in Hakoson, Dopa Chetra, Le Catinoncha. Le Canyoto Nyon Chan Dopa Momborisona, Le Catan Dopa Cantomara. Sonta, Dopa Tigunazo Canichiri, but that's how much Chachi Savlo on the Hako. Sonta Dopa the Machon reaching down, not to control Zavat and Chato Chat and Argecha Toma. So Dopa the mountain the Vera, Susan Dopa Macani, any Chatos are contras, Dopa Conda, Chatos are contras and Narcas Sonta. So Dopa the Cathy, Choni Tantona, Masil Diki on the Deparche. Tacheto Pashire Samud. Dopa Chimbuchin and Dopa Chimbuchiano, Jetona and the Great message Jeto Marmi, Marches are message Tiliching do the Calican, Tamat and Dopa Mandu Mission or message Calican. Sonta Dopa Choritaya, the Yapon Kechimbo in Sarisam. Dopa Macani Yungura, so Dopa the Monte on the Tinich on Natiano. Ramandali Mora, Tingola Zawachini, and repairs of Sando Pachonjo, Chichetona, Masitiki, watching onto a Sarisam.
But actually, we don't need to talk so much about the different kind of aspects of the different kind of religious traditions and so forth. And I think that we can just look and examine our situation by means of the very life that we all have right now. So in our life, what we do is that we are striving, we are making a lot of efforts, but still we are not satisfied so much, right? Like our desire or our wish is never really fulfilled. So even if I make a lot of efforts today and I make a lot of efforts tomorrow in order like to fulfill like this kind of desire, eventually we left with having an unsatisfied desire, like feeling that we still have an unfulfilled wish. And then most of the people, this is how they die eventually, like they're just having like unfulfilled desire, like one day after another and so forth, up until they reach the day that they are dying, and then they die with unfulfilled desires. And what is the reason that even though we strive so much and we make so many efforts, we still don't have a fulfilled desire and we still have like this kind of dissatisfaction? So we can say that the reason is that the desire is too big in order. We can say that the actions that we are doing are too kind of small in order to fulfill all the desires that we have. So what does it mean? Actually, it means that if we are talking about all the different kind of mental afflictions that we have, such as jealousy, arrogance, anger, and so forth, all of them are arising from not having our desire fulfilled, like thinking that I need to have more than what I have now, or this is not good, this is not good enough, being like kind of discontented. But actually, if we can think that what we have now, okay, it is fine, I'm satisfied with it, I'm contented with what I have, so then we can slowly try to decrease the intensity of our desires, and then we can live much more happy life. This is what I think about it. But actually, most of us, what we are doing is that we are just, instead of that, on the opposite side, we just let our desire to get more intense and more stronger and bigger, and then we just left with the unfulfilled wishes and feeling like discontent with it.
Eko demon chijana penangato shala kalanzo ya chala mambo chiyo pachid. La kalanchi zogo tese singal tindi yumun zogo sami tezona zani matro tatian zani matro yate zani matro mate zani angi karzako sami tindi sema macho yumula keton zaya choko jaya zaya kama yore ni semba ndoba makan kenan dil kate chawanda ochete katina kon zani matro jata zoni zate kundoba pro kacheche na ko sama zagme launga so kundoba so da kon zani matro tinu disho no zoni zagi mitri chena barishi shira chama ma kundoba zate chawa ta jana kolun thachoni mendo Kalamena the common the Yona Zani Matracho, so you
So a very kind of simple example that we can give for this kind of situation that I just explained is, for example, when we want to make food for ourselves. So let's say that I can say about my experience actually that I have all the kind of different tools and all the different kind of pans and so forth, whatever I need to make food, all the kitchenware, and I also have different variety of foods in my house. But then when I'm about to make food for myself, so then because of my desire, which always like wants more than what I already have, so I'm saying to myself, oh no, if I make this, it won't be enough in order to fulfill like, what I actually want to eat. And if I eat this, it won't be enough. And this, it would also be not so good. And so this is actually not because I don't have enough food or I don't have enough things to eat or I cannot make for myself food, but this is because my desire is always stays like unfulfilled because of having a lot of desire. So we can say that if we kind of get habituated or get addicted to have like this kind of strong desire, we can say that it will be endless. There will be no end that will actually eventually will be able to fulfill this kind of desire. So this is kind of my experience, and maybe this is also an experience that you is also common with you.
Well, so then the children, then so when in a tanda ni rong kong na ngal kwe thong ma yo de choko ja ya yo re sa ya thong ma kar so na ngin do ba ma kwan ya de me ya ta chi kwan de chan na je po chung yo mo ta le ka chi chi chong cha thong ma na so tri do cha che de ori when in a mi chi kwe ta da yo de re de do ba ma kwan de so so ma che ba so ni so ka ni so ni to de yo nyen de chi lo.
So yeah, this is just like this actually. So as I said in this example, in my kitchen I have everything and everything that I want that we actually can that I can actually make with food for myself. I have like all the food, I have all the kitchenware, so forth. But because of having a lot of desire, I stay with this kind of feeling of discontentment, or this kind of unfulfilled wish. And this is something that we can think about. We can think about the situation. We can think about it also in terms of all the different kind of activities and all the different kind of wishes we have in our life. So this is not like we cannot actually fulfill. It is not like we cannot actually generate a sense of contentment and fulfill desires in our life. But this is just because we have too many desires and our desires is too intense. So even though we have like everything we actually need, we still left with this kind of feeling of discontentment and unfulfilled desires.
Also, then it's him John catching up and got the kilters there, they send the toss continue, get him on oration of Katika Chalcon. The Niki Sandijan, you to church and Diana church and Chita Kama Jutsu, not a judge.
So now we finished the section of how some mental factors are mutually incompatible, and this kind of section is considered to be usually quite important. And now we can finish the like the main session of the this class, and we can move forward to Q&A session. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, we have like 5 minutes left. So if you have any questions, so you can ask. Also, those who are online.
Yeah, I was wondering about the desire to give. So when we have a desire to give and we don't find that there's a place to receive, so I was wondering where that fits in within this. Do we need to accept that we can't give as much as we want? Yeah, so that's the question.
I'll just try to clarify the question. You say that if you have like desire to give,
the desire to be selfless, right? So if we have a desire to be selfless and give more than the environment is able to receive, let's say.
You want to give more than the environment is capable of receiving from you?
Yeah. So do you need to accept that? So if somebody is incapable of, let's say, receiving the love that you're giving, for example.
Jimpatan sa yute, jimpatan sa mite, chashagna, anikon narangi takona jimpatan yate, kon molen che mitu pashigres, agion kakaraina mishi, na do per na di kabla con nieto neta jimpatanya tenola chemi tu baina con narangi samla ota con narangi con la pregite con mola chetu bimare na tende mola chena de gorbes
Tapashoni ko jamba tauna ko lendo me patandina ta machina ya jiro. Ante ta moni je me kashi so gata chize pura chik ropan rawo chi ngal thong rawo chi ndu sambatri samye yosara. Chikabu ta te zazo chi kwari yesari. Kedan jamba tauna ta kano ya ko goni tanto na. Aja ya ko re ta moni kangi chimbo yosa chi le ropa chi kano ya ko mena yo. Te gesa chimbo yin zeni kanda padi tawa chopa umanchu pa na so yore. Nije majashan de ser jarando le legne te kiwa ka te tak ando pino keno pinor nije gikir chonze so so nije ya ko chime so na te cha chi chi oni mala ro pa chi ya ndi ge sa lo tani chamba pento moni pento bo sa chi ro pa chi na tele yo so no sa khare zini la wore ina ashoni te tani chendo mesa yana ma chi na ya kire ma pe sha ta ko lon ton chong chi ma ashol pento yo mara terwa Mikajigui, Sozor Gangi Royona, Mi Ropa Cheondi, Al Ponjo Chik Sambalo, the Sam Louisari. Donald Chimotoni.
So if the situation is that the other side is not willing to accept or to receive whatever you want to give to them, so actually in this case, maybe it would be better and not to give at all from the first place. And it is true, I mean, there are some people that think that that have like this kind of attitude that if you try to help them, so this is actually just a sign of you disregarding them or looking down on them, right? So we should actually be a bit careful in these kind of situations. But in general, we can say that if we have a good motivation and with this motivation we want to be generous and to give, so it is great. And also, sometimes even if we don't have a good motivation, still if we give a certain thing that the other person needs to receive, so it is considered to be a great accumulation of positive force or merit. And it is also something which is being said in the entrance to the middle way written by Acharya Chandrakirti, and I cannot repeat the quote exactly as Gyana just cited. But basically, this quote is indicating that even when someone doesn't have like good motivation, and even when he thinks, now I'm going to give like whatever, whatever possession, whatever I have, I'm going to give it to someone, and I'm considering myself, oh, like I'm so good, like think about myself like so much. Even when someone has like this kind of motivation, and by giving, it's going to benefit the other person, so it is considered to be a great positive deed still. And for example, if you want to practice generosity, we can do it very, very simple and very, very, we can do it very, very easily in the sense that we can just ask like the other person whether he wants me to give to him something, whether he needs help. If he says he does, so we can give to him. And if he says that he does not, so we can just leave it. So the other, do you have any question?
Geshe mentioned that even you don't have the right motivation, it's still considered to be good deed, but then the merit will reduce, right?
Again, agikara sum serna. Kedi dosola kuno ya kumetache. Anite konshana jimpatang waina. Ta genagi ta kun getsa chankores. Inan di kapsu getsa te perna ta getsa saya champala topaina. That is ta chum sigolpes.
Ta karlo yapol tinita yako changing do kera. Ina yo pena michi sortia va ina so kera chen de mi sortia na yori. Kera chen ma lasa nanda ko sortia va ina. Pasho ko sort muyo ditsele kyami tonda chikwa chi jok saro. Ti chani nincha la dewa yungu yore pena sokya wat na so manji pi jamba sri yora so ni ka ge sa chimba sri ina kyabar da yo chiro.
So we can say that most probably there is a kind of difference, but still, for example, if you're talking about the action of saving life of someone, so even if you don't have a good motivation and you just say, I'm going to save the person's life in order to be famous, in order to have a good reputation and so forth, and then we are doing this kind of action, or whether we are doing it because we actually have pure motivation, in these two cases, we are actually making an action for a very, very significant purpose in this kind of case, and therefore it is considered to be an accumulation of a very, very strong root of virtue. And this is also, we can say that this is also falls under the category of practicing the generosity of giving non-fear to someone.
So there's no difference between the married.
That's doesn't care when do this.
Chesa karno ya so ko chechon da kyabar yo chiri lai.
Yeah, so therefore it said that if there is a difference in terms of the quality of the motivation, so most probably there is also a difference in the accumulation of future also.
Pena karno dik chaji cheni nga so kora ja da chance wa tani chena ge sa chika yo ma. Are control kora ja ko ya da chance go me. So so le go ya karno ya ko ta me pa so le pen do ya chika yo ma ri tu ge sa yo ma. Ina ya so manji pi jamba ro chena so so karno dik chana pa so pen chim bo to sa ro. So that le ge sa yo ina karno ya na te li ya yo jro.
So if you give an example of when we are just doing Kora, just circumambulation or around the holy place, or that we are just kind of making prostration and so forth, if you don't have a good motivation, so there is no accumulation of virtue in this kind of case, because we from outside we don't have any good motivation, and also this is not like the object of refuge needs anything from us, that when we are doing circumambulations or we are doing prostrations and so forth, it is not the case, right? But if you are talking about a case in which someone needs a help in terms of like someone needs someone to save his life, so in this case, even when someone doesn't have a good motivation, we are still accomplishing a very, very meaningful purpose, and therefore, in this case, there is a great accumulation of virtue, but most probably we should also posit that there is difference in terms of the greatness of the accumulation of virtue, also by means of the different motivation that one has while doing this action.
Let's go.
Okay, yes, so if there are no
Thank you. You should check your tatama.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Also, thank you everyone that came online.
Yeah, I think that's all on the datas. We get a jamba chickam, the remain maro.